teleprompters. I can't like totally freestyle it.
You're good.
Sunglasses. No one can see where your eyes are anywhere.
You're good to go.
Is it okay to wear sunglasses?
Yeah.
We're going to be really offended.
All right. First off, thanks everyone for coming out. It's a beautiful day to be outside, so kudos to that. Welcome to the National Day of Reason. My name is Nick Singer. I'm the president of the Oklahoma Atheists. Our group's mission is to develop a community of individuals and families who value and promote critical thinking, free thought, reason, and a scientific worldview as opposed to the acceptance of faith and dogma, and who seek to have a positive effect on the community at large through fellowship, ethical and rational discussion, community service, and education. I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about secular humanism and our government's misguided attempt to merge state and religion. Secular humanism is a broad philosophy that advocates human reason and ethics as a basis for moral decision-making. Ideology in any form should neither be accepted nor rejected on the basis of faith, but rather logic. Morals do not need to come from God or a particular book. One needs only use reason and apply the golden rule to come to similar conclusions as believers. One should treat others as one would like others to treat oneself. Versions of this simple maxim are found in all of the world's major religions and can be traced back to ancient civilizations from Babylon to China. The key facet of this idea is that you apply it to all people equally, whether or not they belong to your particular group. This is a key distinction. For generations, we allowed our morality to be dictated by authoritarian systems. Society has finally evolved to embrace the more secular ideas of the Enlightenment, and even then we persisted to hold slaves, prevent women from voting, and discriminate against homosexuals until the 20th century. This evolution of ideas has swept many of the world's major religions, causing them to reinterpret their books to more closely align with the secular morality prevalent in our society. This is not to argue that we, the religious and non-religious, are more different, but that we have looked at the ideas that are out there and come to a general consensus on how we should treat one another. Governor Fallon and members of the government are participating today in a specifically evangelical Christian Day of Prayer event. This tacit endorsement of a particular religion not only excludes those of other religions and none, but it violates the generally accepted interpretation of the First Amendment, the First Amendment's Establishment Clause. Founding fathers Thomas Jefferson and James Madison both spoke of a separation of church and state. Madison believed that this separation was essential for the purity of both. This country has been built on a diverse collection of cultures, experiences, and beliefs. Those beliefs extend to the beliefs in no religion at all. It is unnecessarily divisive for government officials to endorse one group's prayer over all others. The ideal role of government is to meet the needs that are not met by private industry but are deemed important by the governed. Infrastructure, national defense, laws, oversight and regulation, police and fire protection, and education are some of the key areas that government should be focusing on improving. Promoting and endorsing or otherwise influencing legal religious practices and expression is not something the government has any jurisdiction over. These beliefs fall in the realm of freedom of conscience and are deeply personal matters that the government shouldn't participate in. Secular humanists, like all others, have concerns about how we are to be governed, how taxes are to be collected, or how are taxes to be collected, what is the correct amount of regulation for commerce and business, should our children be educated, or how should our children be educated, how do we as a society work together to support our fellow person in times of disaster or hardship. These are challenging questions that many of them require moral judgments to be made. Finding the balance between practicality and fairness and compassion helps reasonable people make better decisions and is something our government should consider in each piece of legislation. One of the key teachings of Christianity is to love your neighbor as you love yourself, yet another version of the Golden Rule. There is an abundance of shared morals between religious and non-religious people because these ideas often come from a logical place. Do we want other people to steal from us, murder us, harm us in any way? Of course not. This is both self-preservation and good for society. Whether or not we share a common religion, we all share one common thread, our humanity. Often, as a way of garnering votes, politicians try to shroud this connection we all share in the trappings of our supposed differences. Religion, as well as politics, should never be used to divide us, but rather to bring us together as a people, to find ways to better our society. Wouldn't we be better served with a day of reflection and discussion between different groups, trying to find common ground? Instead, we have government leaders choosing to support one specific group's efforts. On this day, a group focused on furthering their own religion. As representatives of the public, they ought to be bringing us together. Ideas have merit independent of the source. Loving your neighbor, showing kindness to strangers, these things make sense because we want people to treat us this way. The government and elected officials should keep religion out of the discussion and focus on the merits of individual ideas. Legislate based on what makes sense and leave widely interpreted dogma and irrational ideology behind. Good ideas will have reasoned arguments for them. Focusing on finding common ground and using reason to find good arguments will benefit all of us. Thank you. Totally read it, though. Next up, Mr. Damian Reinhardt. How cool is that?
Well, Nick did a great job of sharing his opinions with you, and I don't have my opinions to share. I didn't have time to write mine out last night. So I'm just going to quote from the Founding Fathers. I'm lazy like that.
Woo, Founding Fathers!
Very motivated group of people. We are here today because the 82nd Congress passed a law respecting an establishment of religion. On 17 April 1952, which we will now find codified in our law at 36 United States Code Section 119, National Day of Prayer. The law reads as follows. The President shall issue each year a proclamation designated in the first Thursday in May as a National Day of Prayer, in which people of the United States may turn to God in prayer and meditation at churches, in groups, and as individuals. That's the law. That is a law respecting an establishment of religion. And on its face, it's invalid, but it has yet to be constitutionally overturned. There's a whole story on that as to its history in the courts, but it's still playing out, so I won't give it to you. I'm here to tell you, as a conservative and a patriot, why I consider the passage and enforcement of this law fundamentally un-American, in the most robust sense of that term. James Madison and Thomas Jefferson are undoubtedly two of the greatest men of the founding generation. Madison is properly considered the father of the Constitution because of his role in bringing the Virginia Plan to the fore and setting up our national government. Thomas Jefferson is considered the primary author and drafter of the Declaration of Independence. Between the two of them, we can find the entire philosophical arc of our nation's founding, from the motivations for making a clean break with England to the political foundations of our government in its current form. Largely because of the influence of these two men, our nation was founded as the world's first self-consciously secular republic, based upon a constitution which mentions religion only for the sake of explicitly keeping government out of it, and keeping it out of government. And so both of these men took the time in their private letters to address this issue, the issue of a National Day of Prayer. What I'm going to share with you today is what they wrote on the topic. Firstly, from James Madison, father of the Constitution. He gives us 5 arguments why we shouldn't be seeing National Days of Prayer as we're seeing inside the Rotunda right now. The first is the argument from the nature of governance. And it is this: governments ought not interpose in relation to those subject to their authority, but in cases where they can do that with effect. An advisory government is a contradiction in terms. So what he's saying there is that the government should only do governing. It shouldn't be telling us how to live our private lives. Fairly straightforward. Sounds reasonable. And conservative, which some people claim to be, but I really am. The next argument is an argument from religious incapacity. The gods are against us. This is the argument I call politicians, not priests. And it is this: the members of a government, as such, can in no sense be regarded as possessing an advisory trust from their constituents in their religious capacities. They cannot form an ecclesiastical assembly and issue such decrees or injunctions addressed to the faith or the consciences of the people. In their individual capacities, as distinct from their official station, they might unite in recommendations of any sort whatever, in the same manner as other individuals. But then their recommendations ought to express the true nature, the true character from which they emanate. What's he saying there? He's saying that the governor and lieutenant governor, they're free to go to church and pray, and they're free to have all sorts of religious expression in their private lives. But it strikes James Madison as un-American for them to get up and do it in their capacity as governor and lieutenant governor. And that's why I don't think they should be doing it. There's 2 more arguments. 3rd one. Almost there. The next argument from James Madison is the argument from religious disestablishment. He says that national days of prayer and fasting, quote, imply and nourish the erroneous idea of a national religion. The idea, just as it related to the Jewish nation under a theocracy, having been improperly adopted by so many nations which have embraced Christianity, is too apt to lurk in the bosom even of Americans, who in general are aware of the distinction between religious and political societies. God, I wish that were still true. His 4th argument is the argument from creeping sectarianism. That's what I call it. That's not his words. And it is this: the tendency of the practice to narrow the recommendation to the standard of the predominant sect. And those of you that have seen the literature that they're passing around inside know that this is actually happening. It's gone from being a national day of prayer to a Christian day of prayer to a just evangelical Christian day of prayer. So James Madison isn't just a founding father, he's evidently a prophet. His 5th and final argument is the argument from political perversions of piety, and it is this: the last and not least objection is the liability of the practice to a subserviency to political views, to the scandal of religion as well as the increase of party animosities. Candid or incautious politicians will not always disown such views. What he's saying there is that politicians will attempt to use public displays of piety to pull the wool over your eyes. They'll talk about family values even as they're stooping to help. We've seen this happen in America. I'm not going to name names. It happens on both sides of the aisle. And finally, I'd like to close with Thomas Jefferson's argument. It's powerful and brief. His argument against national days of prayer is this: I consider the government of the United States as interdicted by the Constitution from intermeddling with religious institutions, their doctrines, discipline, or exercises. I do not believe it is for the interest of religion to invite the civil magistrate to direct its exercises, its discipline, or its doctrines, nor of the religious societies that the general government should be invested with the power of effecting any uniformity of time or manner among them. Fasting and prayer are religious exercises, the enjoining of them an act of discipline. Every religious society has a right to determine for itself the time of these exercises, and the objects proper for them, according to their own particular tenets. And this right can never be safer than in their hands, where the Constitution has deposited it. That was in a letter to Reverend Samuel Miller, January 1808. So in conclusion, the 2 greatest founders of our country have taken a stand against what's going on inside the Rotunda in no uncertain terms. And I'm sorry to say that so few of us are left to see things their way. God bless you, and God bless America.
Great.